Folks, you're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about, from a couple of days ago now, but comparing the top 10 news stories of the globalist media versus the non-globalist media. So now I got two of the most pronounced globalist sort of media organizations. Remember, they use a very leftist sort of Marxist delivery system to bring the information out to the public. It's globalist in the back room, but they fit it into a Marxist delivery, Marxist missile, if you like, as they shoot it out into the public. The non-globalist news outlets, which are roundly condemned as being Nazi and everything like that, of course, by the globalist media. There's not too many of them, and they don't have the same sort of legacy, sort of entrenched following, if you like, that the globalist controlled ones do. Although I do think that's changing. If you look at the readership of, say, MSNBC and CNN and those globalist sort of the BBC in Britain and that sort of thing, they seem to be declining, and certainly in proportion to the population at least. So let's compare the two of them. So I'm picking the top stories that they have, and I'll talk a little bit about how the reporting is, the presentation. Now, the number one story here was evil Republicans in the US are holding up money for Ukraine, little Ukraine, fighting for democracy against Putin, who is Hitler, and the emotional reporting. We all know that Putin is trying to take over the world. We just know. How do we know? Well, we just know. And the Democrats in the US, Joe Biden, the guy who won the most votes ever in the history of presidential elections, because he's so fucking good. He's trying to fight back against Putin because Putin and Trump are Hitler and that's that. So everybody who's questioning where is this money going. Has it been accounted for? Has there been any sort of, reconciliation of the funds, where they've gone, and so on? And obviously large amounts have gone for corrupt purposes. But if you question that or ask about it and say, well, let's stop the money going there, what is this achieving? What are we producing by this? America's already approaching bankruptcy. Why should we be spending billions, and so on and so forth? Then you're a Putin stooge. And if you're a Putin stooge, that means you're Hitler. And it's ridiculous reporting. And it's very short on facts, very, very big on emotion, and we know that all they're trying to do is stop Putin, who is Hitler, of course. And we know that. We know that anyone that questions it is also Hitler. We know that. And so all assertions and no real facts. In fact, you'd struggle to find any facts in the reporting there. And it's, Biden is a beacon of goodness in supporting Ukraine, and, Zelensky is another Churchill. And now, on the non-globalist side, they're questioning the money, saying, well, given we don't know where the money's going, we don't know what it's achieving, we don't know what it's being spent on, given Zelensky's very poor record. I mean, he's suspended elections, he's suspended media outlets, he's done all sorts of things that are hardly democratic. And he's taken more punitive action against his own people than Putin has against Russians. So really, we need to put this in perspective. Why are we supporting such a corrupt, anti-democratic regime? And some serious questions and a lot of facts in there. And so by comparison, it was a very balanced article. So that was the non-globalist thing. It's not saying let's not support Ukraine. It's not saying let's not, but what are we trying to achieve? Putin was provoked into this war. There's been vast sums of money going on. We don't know what. So these are all reasonable, sensible questions that are necessary when any sort of expenditures, and particularly expenditures in the multiple billions, are going on. So the so-called right-wing or non-globalist news outlet is what I prefer, asked sensible questions in a very reasonable article. Now, just looking at the way, whether it be through Wikipedia or the way they're described, these two non-globalist outlets are listed as neo-Nazi, fascist, far-right, misogynistic, homophobic, just about every name you can possibly throw at an organisation is thrown in, again, even on their Wikipedia page, for goodness sake. So there's no attempt to say, well, these guys have a different point of view or something. They're Nazi through and through. Hitler is the editor, this sort of thing, and so it's quite ridiculous that they're cast in that light when they're none of those things. Certainly, any of the articles that I've seen don't suggest any of that. They do ask the difficult questions, but of course they're not on board with the globalist project, which is why they're being denounced. Story number 2: climate change, the hottest weather that we're having ever. Proves that the world's about to end, and much more radical climate action is needed, much more. Again, no facts. Where they do quote people, quite alleged experts, they don't say that these supposed experts are in fact radical activists. They're not independent experts at all. The second biggest story on so I'm going to take a sip of water here. The second biggest story is an investigation of the the millions that have been allegedly stolen by the Biden family through corrupt backroom political chicanery. Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's brother, and so on. So that was the second biggest story on the non-globalist. Number 3, another pitch at climate change, which shows just how much the globalists are invested in this. More climate change emergency propaganda and catastrophizing and all this thing. And this one, little children are suffering. Climate change is causing little girls dressed in pink are suffering. They'll grow up one day to be lesbians, and they're dying because of climate change, and that's because they're Nazis. And very emotional, absurd, and ridiculous. So that was number 3 story. The number 3 story on the non-globalist website was woke teachers raping, so it's alleged, raping first-year high school students. So the cutting edge, and this is quite well documented. So again, we need to assume innocence of anyone accused or charged, and it should work its way through the courts. But these are the claims that are being made. Number 4 story on the globalist ones, yet more climate change catastrophe. The 4th biggest story on the non-globalist ones was the Democrat cities have the big cities in the US, have the highest rates of sexual disease and death from sexual diseases. This includes AIDS and other STDs. And showing or demonstrating the number of or the amount of methadone or other drugs or whatever that are being handed out, and the increase in deaths of from diseases and from shared needles and all sorts of sort of things like that. So that should be a headline, really, given the amount of people dying, particularly given there's so many black people dying from these. And gay people. Again, you think that would be a headline, but instead it's buried. Number 5 story is racism is everywhere, whites to blame. White people are just all Hitler, and everyone else is a blameless victim of the evil white people. So racism everywhere. Everything has to change to stop these evil white Hitler Nazis and so on. The 5th biggest story on the non-globalist ones was the high cost of living in the West that's brought on by insane green climate policies, and the mass migration, and also the offshore buying of property. Communist Party generals buying up vast swathes of property and so on all across the West. And the high cost of living is squeezing people and making it much harder to get by. Again, this should be a permanent sort of headline, because the politicians are pursuing, Western politicians under globalist control, are pursuing policies that are brutally driving up the cost of living, and yet they're able to blame it on Hitler or climate change or something like that, which is utter and absolute nonsense. Again, the non-globalist news outlets are sticking to real news stories and that are really affecting people. Number 6 biggest news story. Again, they're having a good go at racism, this time from more of the misogyny angle. So it's black women are suffering because of also suggesting and implying that all the shoplifting, the black gangs, they're only doing it to put bread on the table. So they got to steal top of the range handbags to put bread on the table? I don't think so. This is then brought back to, again, evil white racism. So that's the 6th biggest story for the globalist news. The 6th biggest story in the non-globalist one are looking at Biden's, or the Biden administration's policies in and around COVID and elsewhere. Again, the rising cost of energy and so on, and saying, well, this is really the biggest cause, or among the biggest cause of inflation, as well as, of course, again, the mass migration and the increased price in, say, rents and mortgages. Again, a headline story. To me, as a citizen, that is an important story. But the globalist control ones don't really report on that. Another 7, white racism is the cause of decline. So they're saying that the decline in social trust in the West isn't because of distrust in government, that's globalist control and acting directly contrary to the interests of the white population. No, social trust isn't declining because of that. It's not declining because there is a mass moving in of people from other cultures and third world peasant cultures, and that. No, it's not because of that. It's because of evil white Nazi fascist racist. It's because of Hitler, and just another hit piece on the white people to try and blame and shame and guilt. The 7th biggest story in the non-globalist ones is how the woke is destroying Western institutions. I don't know how anyone could disagree with that. Number 8, biggest story, and again, they don't deviate really from racism and climate change, are really the 2, misogyny perhaps, but those are really the globalist news outlets. That's all they fucking talk about. The real issues I just aren't talked about. Number 8 story in the globalist controlled media is that climate change is causing species extinction. But then instead of arguing that there are numerous species that have gone extinct, well before humans ever showed up, instead of sort of going down that line, they're directly pointing, well, it's only ever occurred because of humans and it's white humans and it's white males. So again, they come back to this attack on white people and attack on misandry, the hatred of men. The 8th biggest story on the non-globalist media is how home prices have increased over the last 35 years. Again, an important story that should concern all of us. Number 9 of the globalist ones, evil, populist, divisive politicians who actually want to do what the people want them to do. But the people who elect them, they're listening to the people who elect them and then acting on those, the concerns of the people. They're actually doing what the voters want them to do. These are evil populist people, evil populist politicians. That they're divisive. They create social division because they're evil and they're white and they're male, and they're set to win elections in a number of places around the world. Some of them smaller European states and so on. But this is proof that Nazis are everywhere. Hitler. So So if you're populist means Hitler, which means Nazi, they've got this ridiculous line that they push, a propaganda line that populism meaning you do what the people that vote for you want you to do. You represent them in the government. But once you do that, then you're Hitler. That's it. Simple. Pure and simple. You are Hitler. And the fact that these people are going to win elections by getting voted for by the people, democratic elections, that proves that Nazis are everywhere. Everywhere. Nazis are everywhere. And that shows that the big trouble we're in. So the ninth biggest story in the non-globalist one is why should low IQ, low grade students, this is college kids in America, they talk about the college kid debt. Why should those kids get bail? This is the non-globalist news. So the argument is that these low IQ sociology, African American music studies or something like that, why should they get bailed for debt when they've got a useless degree that they shouldn't have done in the first place and should never have been offered in the first place? If it's such a big problem, then the university can provide these courses for free. But so the argument is that they shouldn't get bailed for debt. These students shouldn't get out of their debts, and this is a way of making sure that students understand that going to college, apart from getting radicalized to hate white people and hate white society, it doesn't give you any benefit when you're doing some bullshit crap degree. So they're saying in this article, the non-globalist news is saying that if you're just going to give students free, bail them for the debt, it just gives the wrong sort of market signals and creates what's known as moral hazard. So 10th biggest story is there's not enough mixed race, physically handicapped people, quadriplegic, paraplegic. There's not enough non-white handicapped people in employment and certainly in key jobs or supervisory jobs. And this is white people to blame. And again, it's only because Nazis were everywhere that black lesbian quadriplegics are not presidents of the bank or something like that. The 10th biggest story, the non-globalist news, was Western government, globalist-controlled Western government overreach on censorship of social media and elsewhere. So that gives you an idea. That may be a little bit of a boring sort of litany there, but gives you an idea of just the huge difference in the top stories and what's being picked, selected as a story, a headline story or a top 10 story, and how they're reported. To me, I look with horror at the globalist media, at their misreporting, their absolute determination to tell lies upon lies upon lies. I think, well, if your whole narrative relies on so many lies, then it's got to be a bullshit narrative. It's got to be unsustainable. The only way you can even have a hope of prevailing there is to shut down every other voice, which of course is what they're trying to do. Now, in the case of the non-globalist media, they're all issues that I think are, it's just me, that I think are very important, but I think a lot of people would. I think, real voters, real people living real life. The waste of money on the Ukraine, on a war that they deliberately provoked Putin into, the climate change thing, how this is being relentlessly pushed by the globalists, again, relying on lies and untruths and all sorts of bullshit to push it. The corrupt Biden family, they go after Trump with fanaticism, yet there's no one seems to be interested in going after the Biden corruption, which is, on the face of it at least, quite extensive. Gay lesbian teachers encouraging first-year high school students to have sex with them. I think that's, especially given how hard they're pushing gay lesbian pornography in schools in America and elsewhere. I think that's an important story. How badly run Democrat cities are and how social decay is the worst in those cities than anywhere else in America. The high cost of living, inflation, how wokery is destroying institutions, inflation of home prices and rent and mortgages. Why should the taxpayer give free money to low IQ, minority students, or any student for that matter, for bullshit courses, and why should censorship be permitted, but only on views that don't accord with the globalist narrative. These are all very important stories, but they're only important stories for white people who believe in free and fair elections, the rule of law, due legal process, accountability, merit. Those sort of stories are important to people who think that way. If you don't think that way, then those sort of stories are not relevant. You want stories of that there's Hitler is everywhere and those sort of things if you're on the other side. Anyway, that's a little roundup there of the difference between the top stories. You've been with Tasha today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.